Hey folks, welcome to today's episode of the Hospitable Host podcast. Today I'm speaking to Steph Weber of the Weber Co. So Steph knows everything about brand design and marketing for short-term rentals. She's also a hospitable host, so she knows and loves our software too. And you'll often see her talking about us and saying nice things about us on social media. So we had to get her on to learn more about her business. So hang in there, we're about to get started. But just as a reminder, as always, if you do like today's episode, please do like it and share it and give our podcast a little follow. Thanks. Hey, Steph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Miles, I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great, no problem at all. So I'm actually really interested and intrigued about getting into kind of branding and design conversation today. Despite my background being very plain and boring, I'm actually quite interested in interior design and kind of some of the science and art behind it. So yeah, intrigued to see what we uncover today.
Yeah, well, it's so funny. I mean, my background's very plain and boring too, but I'm sitting in my office and I have not been able to make a commitment to this wall behind me yet. So this is where we're at. It's fine.
That's the trouble. I think that's the hardest part of interior design, just like making that decision and getting something going, right?
Yes.
Beyond
Yeah. It's much easier for short-term rentals than for my own space. It feels like such a big commitment.
Yeah.
With short-term rentals, it's like, oh, we're creating this experience for guests. I know what that needs to be. I know the process. I know how we need to get there. So let's just go all in on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe we can start with the background of, you and the Weber Co, right? And how did you kind of get into that space of short-term rentals versus, just designing for yourself or
Sure.
more general properties? Yeah.
Yeah. So, Miles, I'll try to give you the short version of this story, but my brand started as a fashion, beauty, and travel influencer back in 2016. And I've worked with multiple different hotel brands through that. So it was the brand name was Trendy and Indie. I worked with multiple hotels, had partnerships on Wall Street, Napa Valley, over in Europe, out in Nantucket area, East Coast, and just kind of all over. And in that, I realized in working with the brands that I was supporting, I could help them in a bigger and better, more powerful way. And many of them needed support with brand strategy. And so I pivoted the Weber Co. fully in 2019 to be branding and marketing strategy for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And I worked with hundreds of different business owners, helped them scale to 6 and 7 figures and grow their brands, whether they were online entrepreneurs or they were brick and mortar stores. Again, like I've worked with a variety of different industries. In 2023, I was 8 months pregnant with our second little boy. And my husband and I were like, yeah, now's the perfect time to get into short-term rentals. Like, why not? Let's just like uproot our entire lives and, it's fine. We'll be okay. So we did that. And we bought our first property here in Indianapolis where we live. And then we started our co-hosting business at the same time. And in that, Miles, I really started going, okay, there's something here. Like there's something in this industry. Yeah. And I had not niched the Weber Co. yet to that point because there wasn't an industry that I felt so intimately connected to that I was like, I can take this company, this branding and marketing company and our agency and everything that I've built and go all in on an industry until we found short-term rentals. And I was like, listen, I have this decade-long career of branding and marketing knowledge and experience that very much parallels and works well in the short-term rental industry. And there's a huge need in this industry. And the bridge kind of was designed. So that's where that came into play as well. So now the Weber Co. exists to support short-term rental owners and boutique hotel owners in branding, design, and marketing. We're also building our own micro resort called Cabins on the Cumberland. So we have our hands in literally every possible pot in the short-term rental industry.
Nice. I love it. And would you say that experience of kind of being a host yourself is kind of that unique advantage that the Weber Co. has versus other
huge
agencies?
Yeah. I mean, not only am I a host, you look at it from like a couple different perspectives, right? Like we're real estate investors now. So we totally understand the importance of ROI and the importance of every dollar that we're spending. What are the results? Like what's coming back to us, right? So we look at it from that perspective, but of course we also look at it from the guest experience side of things. And it's like our heart and soul behind getting into this space was wanting to host guests and create experiences. When we're listing our properties, it's so much more than just a place to crash. Guests are looking for this place to be able to create core memories. For the cabins, we say traditions begin here. Like we know that families are coming to visit us at Cabins on the Cumberland. And they are creating family traditions and they're going to come back and stay with us year after year because of that. So anyway, just being a host ourselves, of course, helps me within the Weber Co. And it just helps me have a different perspective rather than just the branding and marketing side. It's like, no, I'm a host right alongside all of you. I'm an investor right alongside all of you as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sweet. And so just kind of thinking about, that branding and marketing piece, before we kind of dig into some of the tips, what are some of the biggest mistakes or missed opportunities you see folks making when it comes to kind of branding and marketing their properties?
So I would say first and foremost, Miles, is that they're not doing it, right? Like that's probably the biggest mistake that I see. It's like, oh, we'll list our property on Airbnb and VRBO and like on these OTAs. And that's great, you guys. And I'm certainly not over here saying like, leave them tomorrow, right? But I am saying have control over your brand and business. And like kudos to Airbnb. They've done a phenomenal job at building their brand. They really have. But now as short-term rental owners, and especially those of you that are building your portfolios and you're expanding to have multiple properties under your umbrella, or you're building a micro resort or boutique hotel or whatever it may be, it is absolutely non-negotiable for you to build and establish your own brand, because that's what guests are loyal to. That's what keeps them loyal to you. And then if you're not marketing that brand, of course, guests don't know about you, and the recognition isn't there. The loyalty is not there. The trust isn't there for them to be able to make that booking decision with you. So it all has to work together. But the biggest mistake is that you're not doing anything with it right now. You haven't focused on the branding side of things and gotten clear around that brand strategy. You're really not doing anything with marketing. And this by no means am I sitting here telling you, you've got to go create an entire social media account and spend hours a day creating content. Like, that's really not realistic, to be honest. But well, depending on who you are. But also, there are so many different ways that you can market your property and get it in front of potential guests and also past guests that are incredibly powerful that we're just not taking full advantage of. So that's one of the big mistakes. I think the other big mistake that I see is if you are leveraging a platform like social media. Again, we list our properties on these OTAs, and we usually have instant results, right? It's like instant gratification. It's like, that's what we're used to. That is not always the case on social media. Now, we have had results. Of course, we see bookings come from our Cabins on the Cumberland account. And until very recently, we've had less than 600 followers, and we're getting bookings directly from social media efforts, right? But it definitely takes some time and nurturing and loving in order for you to see those results. So just know, again, when you are starting to market your properties and take that into your own hands, it's not potentially going to be that overnight success, but it is the thing that is going to help support you for the long haul. And if you're creating a business, not a nice little side hobby, then having branding and marketing strategies is absolutely essential to your bottom line and to the longevity of your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So obviously, we've kind of established you've got to do something. You can't do nothing. It takes a long time, though, sometimes to kind of get something to stick. So where do we start, right? What's like, if I'm not doing anything, but I've decided, I've listened to Steph, I should do something, what do I do?
Very first step is going to be to outline and identify who your ideal guest avatar is, and then also the two sub audiences that you kind of target. Now, if you already have a property, one of the best ways to get started with this is to copy and paste the reviews that have been left about your property into ChatGPT, and you can prompt ChatGPT and say, hey, based on these reviews, can you give me an outline of my ideal guest avatar? I need demographic information, psychographic information, behavioral information, and potentially what their pain points and also what their deepest desires are. And that's kind of whenever we're doing this brand work, it always starts with identifying that guest avatar. And what I just gave you, demographic, behavioral, psychographic information, and then also your core pain points and deepest desires. You've got to identify those 5 components in order to build a brand strategy and messaging to speak to that ideal guest avatar. And again, remember, everything with branding is about connecting to our audiences on an emotional level. When they're coming to our properties, again, they're not just looking at a place to hang out or a place to crash. They're looking for the story that's going to be cultivated. And they're doing this when they're swiping through your listing photos. They're like, oh, I can envision our family sitting around the fire, playing games and drinking wine and just reconnecting like we haven't done in years, right? This is what they're doing. They're not just like, oh, that bed looks nice to sleep in. They're telling the story. So we want to make sure that we're connecting to our audience on that emotional level, which is why we have to intimately understand who they are as that very first step. We identify kind of an ideal target audience, who's our main core demographic. And then we have these 2 sub audiences, which incorporate other guests that we might also attract to our property based on the way in which we're designing it, based on its location, so on and so forth. So using Cabins on the Cumberland as an example, we have our main demographic being families, likely a family of 4. They have 2 kiddos. Likely those kiddos are in elementary school, maybe entering into middle school, but in general, that family unit is feeling very disconnected. Both parents are working, kids are in extracurricular activities. Their weeks are like everybody gets up, brushes off to work and school, comes home, quickly eats, maybe together, maybe not together, goes to after school activities, rinse, wash, and repeat all weekend long or all week long. And then weekends, of course, are filled with more activities. So that family is feeling incredibly disconnected. One of the reasons they go on vacation is so that they can reconnect to each other, so that they can also have their own adventures and their own experiences. And so we very clearly speak to that in the brand messaging and also in our marketing efforts for the cabin. So that's where it starts. And then from there, you build out your brand strategy and you kind of pick your different marketing mediums that you're going to focus on and go all in on to get going.
Nice, I love that. And then, so obviously, you've kind of revealed to us there kind of your key demographic and your key target audience. There's going to be other people going after that same audience, possibly in the same area of the country as you. So there's other options that those guests can choose from. How do you start to kind of differentiate your property and maybe the way that it's listed and marketed as well from some of that competition?
Yep. So this is where the brand strategy comes into play, Miles, and where branding and design go hand in hand. So when we're working through brand, we are working through brand stories. So again, like the story example that I gave you of the guests who are swiping through your listing photos and talking about what experience their family is going to have there. That's what they're doing. And so we identify what those brand stories are. And then we want to be incredibly intentional when we're designing that those stories get to be a part of the design, right? So this is where it all has to work together. And so it's one thing to, like make wallpaper selections, but it's like, what's the intentionality behind this? And why are we putting specific pieces in our spaces? And how do they contribute to the overall story, the overall feeling that we're working to create inside of this property? And there, of course, are certain ways that you can differentiate yourselves just based upon your market. You do want to do a little bit of market research. But I personally feel and see that the properties that are doing best are the ones who kind of are like, we have this sort of out there idea, but we're going to go all in on it and really commit to it. There's someone I follow on Instagram, and they have created an entirely pink cottage. I literally think it's called like the Pink Cottage or something along those lines. And she has just done an absolutely killer and phenomenal job. She's obviously very clear on who her target audience is. And then she wasn't afraid to be like, everything in this house is going to be pink in the most classy, like beautiful way. It's super cool. So again, it's just kind of going, okay, how do we need to define ourselves in the market in a way that allows us to separate and stand out a bit and attract those guests who really want to, A, stay with us, but B, who want to be loyal to us in some capacity. So again, it all ties back into the experience that you're working to cultivate.
Nice, I love that. And then just kind of think about, elevating the brand and elevating the design of your property. If people don't have a big budget, where are some like good places to start to kind of, give it that, special element and make it stand out?
So one of our core values and core beliefs, Miles, is thoughtful hospitality. And this is kind of a term that we use within our co-hosting business. It's a term that we use with Cabins on the Cumberland. And we want our guests to feel thought of and cared for. And that means literally the most simple of things, but having things that guests are like, I didn't even expect this to be here. Like we have an entire did you forget it basket under each vanity inside of our cabins and inside of our properties as well, with toothbrushes and toothpaste and deodorant wipes, just like these very small and subtle little amenities that our guests are like, wow, I feel thought of. And it's not like we're replenishing these and restocking these all the time, but those are the things that we get reviews on all the time. You want to know how many reviews we've gotten about our hot tub? Like maybe 5. But the number of reviews that we have received about we had everything we need, even things that we didn't think we need, that they were there. Or even like for our cabins, we do little fire starter kits. And it's like a DIY fire starter kit, but we provide all of the supplies there. And we also have a video on how to do it and like how to piece it together. So starting a fire is easier. So again, it's like those thoughtful little touches that are literally very minimal cost to us, but that make a big difference for guests. Or like having beach towels. If you do have a hot tub, have beach towels, or you have a pool, have beach towels aside from just the towels that they're using for showers and so forth. Again, less than $50, but a way that your guests feel like you have thought about them. So again, this comes back to the brand. We identified what our core values are. Thoughtful hospitality was one of those things. Now, how do we actually incorporate that core value into the experience we're providing for guests? I gave you guys some examples of that, and they are all very minimal cost to us.
Yeah, nice. And I guess the nice thing about that is you're essentially talking about creating like little wow experiences. So it's the unexpected elements. People don't think it's a small touch, but people don't expect to have it in there, right? A
Yeah.
hot tub, they know there's going to be a hot tub. That's why they booked your place, right? They don't know there's going to be like a fire starter kit to make things a lot easier when setting up the fire. Those kind of did you forget it items. I love that. That's a great idea.
Yep.
Cool.
100%.
So just kind of touching on design as well, and there's obviously kind of the aesthetic design and making the place look amazing as well, and making sure that everyone has everything. How do you balance that with kind of durability though as well, right? So it's going to get used by a family, for instance, in your properties. How do we balance it looking nice for the next guest with actually like it's got to have a bit of wear and tear as well?
This is a great question, Miles. And you kind of have to think about your items that are going to be used most common in your properties. And you have to think about too, like I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So we get to a hotel and what does my 3-year-old do? He jumps on the bed and jumps on the bed. So that's how your guests are using your space, right? Like you maybe have heard the saying, nothing drives like a rental. Okay, we believe that about our Airbnb properties, our short-term rentals as well. Like it's going to be used like a rental, right? So, and guests are great. We've usually had really respectful and just phenomenal guests. But that said, you have to select quality pieces that also contribute to the aesthetic and to the design that you're going for as a whole. So, quality pieces that you really want to maybe spend more of your budget toward might be your sofas. Or if you're doing a sleeper sofa, invest in a solid sleeper sofa, not one that's going to break after one use, and not one also that's going to be a pain for guests, right? I just went to a property that we're going to co-host and they purchased a sleeper sofa and I was like, I don't think this is going to work, you guys. Like this, I didn't design it. So, we'll see how it goes. But it's one of those, it's like kind of like you pull it out from underneath and it's just kind of like, it's just weird. So I'm like, oh, we'll see. But again, like quality sofa, quality sleeper sofa, quality beds. There's a product called Loctite that you can actually put on all of the screws when you are piecing together furniture items so that things don't get loose and wobbly. We see this happen so often with bunk beds. They're just like, they wobble back and forth. And I don't want my child sleeping up at the top of a wobbly bunk bed. So again, just being really mindful about if you're targeting families, okay, then how are your items going to be used? And you want to make sure that you're investing in those quality pieces, or if things are potentially broken, damaged, etc., that you have a team that's very committed to your level of excellence that can communicate with you when things are broken. We had a bench break at one of our properties in the kitchen. Okay, we replaced the chairs literally within like 48 hours because we knew that we had guests coming in and we just wanted to get things replaced. I literally have extra chairs in my garage. I'm like, we're prepared over here. So again, you just kind of have to keep those components in mind as you are thinking about design, and do walkthroughs. Like have either, whether it's you being boots on the ground or you have a runner or an inspector, like you have another team member. It's always good to have eyes outside of just your cleaning team. Usually our cleaners are absolutely phenomenal at catching things, but they're also there to do the job of cleaning. They're not there going through and like moving every piece of furniture around and like shaking the headboards to make sure that, nothing is loose or whatever the case might be. So do walkthroughs. This is actually a practice that for our co-hosting business, we do this usually before big events here in Indianapolis, or at least like on a once a month basis. And we just kind of do a walkthrough and check on furniture, of course, but we're also checking on appliances, lights, fans, all of those basic things. So like be mindful of that. And guests don't want to show up and there be problems right away. So we're always willing to invest more dollars for an inspector to go and like make sure that everything is solid because it saves us the headache in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talked about those wow moments, and there's kind of the negative of that if you turn up and the main light bulb doesn't work, right? And it's really dark and the guest doesn't want to be on, step ladder changing a light bulb, right?
100%. Or like either your guests booked your property and one of your features is this beautiful Instagrammable neon sign and the neon sign doesn't work or whatever the case might be, right? Yeah, it's unfortunate. Again, like there are things that sometimes we just can't prevent, right? And it is what it is. But there are steps that you can take to be as proactive as possible. I can't tell you, when we have done these property walkthroughs, not only do we catch things like loose furniture or whatever it might be, but we also catch leaks. We also catch lights being out. We also catch fans not working. So it's like all of these small things that make a big difference to guests that I know we're going to get a message about at 10 p.m. and I can't fix it right then and there. So again, just trying to be proactive. And that starts with quality items from a design perspective too.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So obviously talked a lot about guest experience there from a design perspective and kind of, maintaining the property. What about software? We know you're a Hospitable user. How's Hospitable helping you with the guest experience? And, what's probably a top feature for you that you would kind of recommend to anyone currently using Hospitable or just kind of on the fence about signing up?
So, Miles, we selected Hospitable because of its guest messaging features and guest messaging automation. So, a few of the things that we absolutely love that Hospitable does, number one, are all of the different automations that we can put in place. And honestly, we're probably not even using them to their fullest capacity. I've seen some other hosts who are like, they have me beat far and wide, which is absolutely phenomenal. But guest messaging is absolutely incredibly robust on this platform, and that's one of the reasons that we selected it. So, each of our properties is unique in their own way. And so we have different check-in instructions for each property. And it was so easy for me to be able to just go in and set those up and use the short codes and use custom codes that you all have as part of the platform, and make sure that those automated messages are sending from me, especially since we're a co-host on owners' accounts. I don't want them sending from owners. I want them sending from me. And it's very easy to just navigate all of those pieces on Hospitable and adjust accordingly as well, right? If you have to make small changes to whatever it may be, that's so easy to do on Hospitable. The other thing that we love is their review feature. So when a review can go out automatically, or we can go in and leave a bad review, which we've had to do this past weekend, was pretty rough here in Indianapolis. So we had to go in and leave some not so stellar reviews. And again, Hospitable allows us to do that very easily and not publish those until the very end of the review period, which is really great. And then, of course, you have your automated features to be able to reply to reviews, or at least AI can help us do that. So you guys have just made it easy for us to be able to go in and click buttons, which cuts our time down significantly. Like, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, man, if I had to send every single guest their check-in messages, or every single guest a request for review, or every single guest our extend stay message, how many hours a week would I actually spend sending guest messages? Like probably 40 hours a week. I'm not kidding. It would be an entire full-time job that you guys have taken and automated and streamlined. And it's a better guest experience as well, right? Like we get so many compliments from our guests on, oh my gosh, they checked in with us after our first night. Like they checked in to make sure that we were doing okay. And again, thoughtful hospitality, guests feel thought of. So Hospitable aligns with that core value of ours too.
Nice. I love to hear that. That's great. Sweet. So just the final question before we wrap up, Steph. Love to think about 2025. So fairly open question. Either kind of a trend that you think that we'll see in the industry, or what's next for the Weberco. Or you can answer both if you're feeling confident and have an answer.
I can answer both, Miles. For a trend for the industry that we're going to see is more the incorporation of more lifestyle photography in our listing photos. So we've started to see this a little bit this year, but I think we're going to see it even more in 2025. And it's a way that you can differentiate. And this doesn't have to be like people with faces in your photos, but it can be like someone's back sitting by the fire, drinking a coffee, reading a book, right? So again, you're trying to tell the story of that moment. It can be kids playing in the pool. And again, you don't even have to show faces. It can just be like the back of their heads or whatever it might be, right? But we're going to see more of that. Like, how are people actually using your space? And again, we want to see that. Like, if you say that you have this beautiful movie theater room, show me people interacting inside of that movie theater room. I think we'll see more and more of that. And again, it's kind of like a mirror of what works really well on social media, right? If you're just trying to post your boring listing photos, no offense, sometimes they're boring. Your boring listing photos on social media and bad Canva graphics, that's not going to work for you because your audience doesn't feel connected to that content. They're not going to engage with it. So therefore, social media is not going to work for you. I think we're going to start to see more of that inside of our, listing photos, even just on the OTAs as well, which kind of segues me into what the Weberco is doing. So in 2025, we are going to relaunch our full service agency. And so we will be providing full services from strategy all the way through to implementation and execution when it comes to social media marketing, email marketing, brand strategy. We've been doing some of these pieces, but we're kind of rebranding, remessaging, repositioning, and going all the way in on it as it pertains to the short-term rental and boutique hotel space. So, if you're over here going, I'm not sure what it looks like to use influencers in my property or how to source influencers, we're going to handle that for you. So you're going to be able to work with us so that we can tag team it and make that come to life for you, and then help you with the strategy and execution of all of that from a social media perspective, email perspective, and so on and so forth. So again, the goal there being we're helping hosts have more control over the marketing of the brands and the businesses that they are building. And especially for those who are building micro resorts or boutique hotels, you're building a business asset. Having social media, having email marketing, these are not just nice to have things. They're an essential part of your overall business strategy. When you go to sell that business someday, your business will be more valuable because you have built these assets, right? This could be the same thing, I guess, if you were selling your short-term rental portfolio or, like really going all in on the branding behind that. Or if you're a co-host in the space, like going all in on how you are branding and marketing yourself and having control over that. So that's in a nutshell what's coming down the pipeline for the Weber Co., along with many other things. So please stay tuned and follow along on Instagram so we can connect.
That's very exciting. So I guess one final question. I lied, that wasn't the last one. Where do people go and find out more? What's the handle? Where do they kind of follow along?
Yep. Come hang out at the Weber Co. on Instagram. That's probably the best place to connect with me. If you want to see what we're doing with our cabin project, you can follow Cabins on the Cumberland on Instagram. I do also have a Facebook group, so you can come join me there, but start with the Weber Co. on Instagram, and then you can come further into the world.
Sweet. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Steph, for joining. It's been a fantastic episode.
Thank you, Miles, for having me.
Cheers. Have a good one. Okay, thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode focused around brand design and marketing. And as always, please don't forget to like and share this episode and follow the podcast to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Thanks, and see you again soon.